The year was 2022. The world was gripped by a storm of skyrocketing oil prices. Everywhere you looked, the headlines screamed, energy inflation. Russia had just invaded Ukraine, and the aftershocks of the pandemic had sent global energy prices into orbit. Sanctions on Russia, intended to punish Moscow, ended up boomeranging on the very economies that imposed them. Gasoline prices exploded, and some countries like Sri Lanka descended into a full-blown crisis. But guess who was the calm in the storm? India. While the West scrambled, India's gas stations stayed steady. No panic, no price hikes. Indians were paying almost the same price as usual at the pump. And this was despite Indian oil companies taking a financial hit. So how did India pull this off? By ditching the lectures and choosing strategic pragmatism. That's right, India picked realpolitik over rhetoric. The gates were opened for Russian oil to flow into India. And need I say, this strategy worked wonders. This is Shubhangi Sharma for CNN News 18, and in this video we unpack India's successful oil strategy in a post-COVID world and how it benefited not just Indians but the world at large, all while cementing India's growing stature in the international energy supply chain. In 2022, India's state-owned fuel retailers like Indian Oil Corporation, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited and Hindustan Petroleum Corporation stepped in to absorb the global crude price hike. These companies incurred tremendous losses but did not allow the inflated prices to be passed on to consumers. As the price of oil rose internationally, they were at one point losing rupees 20 to 25 on each litre of diesel and rupees 14 to 18 on each litre of petrol. After all, the directions from the Modi government were clear. Indians should not have to pay an extra rupee at gas stations even if oil companies have to incur temporary losses. In a sense, the government was able to insulate Indians from the major hike in oil prices as it gauged that global prices would eventually fall, which they did. Today, India is the second largest buyer of Russian crude oil. Let that sink in. Before the Ukraine war, Russian oil accounted for less than 1% of India's imports. But now, it's nearly 40%. And that's a tectonic shift. And it doesn't stop there. Just recently, Russia's state oil giant Rosneft inked a mega deal with Reliance Industries to supply 500,000 barrels per day for the next 10 years. Folks, that's 0.5% of the world's oil supply. At today's prices, this deal is worth a jaw-dropping $13 billion a year. Now here's the best part. This isn't just about saving a few bucks at the pump. India actually saved $25 billion last fiscal year by ramping up Russian oil imports alone. But it gets even better. India's oil strategy isn't just working for Indians, it's benefiting the whole world, including the West. As an example, let's talk about Europe. Moral grandstanding aside, Europe has been guzzling Indian refined fuel like there's no tomorrow. India's fuel exports to the EU shot up by 58% this year, and the irony, much of this refined oil did come, you guessed it, from Russia. You know what they say, when life gives you Russian crude, refine it and sell it to Europe. India's strategy has turned it into a lifeline for global energy markets. And it's not just about today. By 2030, India will account for more than a third of the projected global increase in oil demand. That's 1.2 million barrels per day. India didn't just look after its own, but by stepping up, India stabilized global markets. Now imagine if India hadn't turned to Russian oil. The Petroleum Ministry says that oil prices could have soared by another $30 to $40 per barrel globally. Even the US has had to admit this. In April 2024, a visiting American official gave India's strategy the thumbs up, saying it's vital to keep the oil flowing, even if it's discounted Russian crude. But wait, wasn't this the same US that publicly lectured India to stop buying Russian oil? Funny how quickly the tune changes when reality kicks in. In fact, the Indian government has been rather outspoken when it comes to defending its oil strategy, especially the fact that oil imports from Russia have grown. Here's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar giving the West a piece of his mind in 2022.
It is our fundamental obligation to ensure that the Indian consumer has the best possible access on the most advantageous terms to international markets. And in that respect, quite honestly, we have seen that the India-Russia relationship has worked to advantage. So if it works to my advantage, I would like to keep that going.
So here's the big picture. India's oil strategy isn't just about saving money or stabilizing prices. It's about economic resilience. It's about emerging as a key player in the global energy trade. And it's about showing the world what smart, pragmatic leadership looks like in a volatile, interconnected world. India didn't just survive the global energy storm, it turned the tide, and that helped not just the West but also the global South. And that, my friends, is how you play the long game.